I hope you're ready for some illogic. Last time we went over our semifinals match against Hitmonchan and the Close Combat Club. Please go check out that video first if you have not done so already, as we went over the team preview breakdown and battle in which, spoiler alert I guess, we won 6-0 for the third straight time, advancing to the finals where we are facing off against another surprise opponent in Chad and his Seattle Steamrollers. Timestamps will be in the description. You see, the top 4 teams were all separated from the rest of the pack all season, being us, the Waterdeep Wobbuffets, Summit County Psyducks, and Cincinnati Incineroar. However, the Psyducks fell to the Close Combat Club previously, and the Seattle Steamrollers mowed through the Incineroar before using hacks and mind games to cruise past the number 1 seed Waterdeep Wobbuffets in the semifinals. My plan for a revenge tour was all set up as if the Psyducks and Wobbuffets had won, as they were supposed to. We'd have played them back to back, and we'd have ended up beating everyone in the league. However, it seems we have fallen into Chad's trap, who himself is on a revenge tour. After the Akron Agrons, he fell to the Incineroar, us in Week 3, go check that video out if you haven't already, and then the Wobbuffets to start the season 0-4. He had a nice winning streak against the bottom part of the league and then clutched out the final week of the season against the Psyducks off the back of his 3 newest acquisitions. You see, a couple weeks from the end of the season, he made 3 defining changes to his team, with a stray away from the Sun component of his team to get some more consistency. G-Max Venusaur, his first round pick, is gone, and in its place is a G-Max Hatterene that has terrorized teams pretty consistently in his 3 games with it. Ditto, which he wasn't liking too much, is gone for another huge threat in Volcarona, a sweeping threat that can also wreak havoc in the sun or outside. Finally, to get points for Volk, he swapped out the Scrafty for a Rotom-Fan, a good defogger that helps Magic Band's Hatterene to clear hazards for Volcarona and Charizard, among others, and provides pretty good electric type that he just did not have before. I was definitely skeptical about getting rid of his kill leader G-Max Venusaur, but he has certainly proved us wrong by ripping off 6 straight wins to squeak into the playoffs as the 5 seed and make it to the finals. He may have destiny on his side, but we've had a slight overhaul ourselves since last time we faced. Dropping the T-Tar that got multiple KOs in our last matchup in exchange for a Mew that can do literally anything. Going over the Week 3 match again real quick, I had a Scarf Dragapult to outspeed G-Max Venusaur in the sun, a Sub-Punch T-Tar designed to lure in and beat Blissey among other things, a Savali Flying to be immune to Earthquake and hit Venusaur super effectively while resisting its grass moves, a full Special Defense Mantine to tank the G-Max Venusaur and change the weather with Rain Dance, a T-Wave Vikavolt to slow him down a little bit, a Life Orb 4-attack Sneasel. On his side he had a standard Toxic Wish Protect Blissey, a Shed Shell mono-attacking Bulk Up Corviknight, Scarf Crocodile which put in tons of work, Life Orb Sheer Force Tauros, a full HP Spadef Venusaur with Leech Seed and Synthesis, and a full Spadef Gastrodon, which means he left his Sun side on the bench very unexpectedly. Now with such different team compositions, especially compared to last time, who has the upper hand? Let's break down the teams a little bit and take a closer look. So Chad's full team now includes a Tauros as his fastest member, which he did bring last time, followed by Volcarona, Charizard, Crocodile, which almost destroyed my team single-handedly last time, Rotom-Fan, Shiftry, Corviknight, who exchanged an awkward 1v1 against T-Tar in a thrilling conclusion, Blissey, who got chipped and then fell to Sneasel, Gastrodon, which took most of its health from Sneasel as well and then fell to a T-Tar Rock Slide of all things due to being specially defensive over physically, Hatterene G-Max, and Torkoal, whose absence last time was the biggest surprise of the matchup. He has a Sun component, sure, but it is definitely less pronounced this time compared to last. That's something I think he learned in our matchup, that he doesn't need to lean so heavily into it lest he be easy to read. So much my Week 3 prep went to waste thanks to lack of Sun, so maybe I'll be a more difficult opponent for him to catch off guard again. I truly believe the toughest matchup in Draft League is the rematch of a game you won, but there are so many factors against that this time. 5 new mons in the overall matchup, the fact that he caught me off guard despite losing, and the general circumstances and unpredictability of my mons, things like Mew and Silvally in particular. That's quite a bit leaning towards my favor realistically, so what exactly have I decided to prepare for? Well, I'll tell you, it's definitely tough to prepare for 2 separate team modes, being Sun and no Sun, but, well, let's just start with Tauros, who did indeed come last time, only to be hit by an unexpected Focus Punch, but otherwise actually could have put in some work. I did not EV things to outspeed it last time. I cheated a little bit, and that could have got me in a big trouble. But in the end, it gets walled by things like Tangela, Sandaconda, even Mew pretty easily. It gets outsped by Sneasel or Dragapult, who will be EV to outspeed this time if they do come. The other mon that didn't cleanly fit into a category in my eyes is the Rotom-Fan, who, even when unexpected, isn't all that great. Vikavolt and especially Magnezone take very little from it, and things like Dragapult, Mew, Sneasel, and Savali outspeed it and hurt it very badly. It can still be annoying, for sure, Volt switching around or spreading burns or even tricking an item, but otherwise it's not that much of an issue. Next up, as I looked at it more, I decided there were 5 mons in particular that I thought he had to bring, and so that would determine the final 3 in a row here. And yes, I'm talking about the Sun Core of Torkoal, Shiftry, and Charizard. Suffice it to say that Shiftry and Charizard do not come without Torkoal. Having only Torkoal, and I'm convinced of 5 others that need to come, is tricky. Though I suppose you could sub one out and have Torkoal and an Abuser. But is that what's best for his team comp? I don't think so, so that's where we are. Is that where it was? Oh well. So Torkoal itself is pretty decent, but with high defense, rocks and spin, body press and stab, sun boosted fire attacks, toxic yawn, it's definitely threatening, but somewhat easy to play around. I haven't seen Chad get terribly creative with it this season, so I can't imagine he's seeing it in the same way. Charizard itself is stupid strong in the sun, sure, but it gets outsped by too much. Rocks are threatening, doubles up with Volcarona in many regards, and generally just not worth it. I actually think that Shiftry, like the last matchup, is the scarier threat, which, with diverse coverage, including Grass and Dark Stab alongside Heat Wave and Low Kick, decimate cores by itself. Still, without a growth boost and or chlorophyll, it just isn't a threat. Not compared to the 6 I'm expecting to bring, with the odd one out, the 6th one that could be swapped out being Blissey. This spot is very flexible. If Rotom or Tauros come, I expect it to fulfill this slot, but I think this is probably the best option he's got, or the one he's going to go with at least. I don't have fighting coverage, and aside from the chip damage I laid into it last time from Volt switches of all things, it's tough to see me bringing Sneasel in a matchup that only got worse for it, not to mention no T-Tar to break through it either. This could absolutely be a pain to get through and could require creativity. I'm mostly worried about the status it spreads, I think, as a T-Wave or Dragapult or a Toxic on a wall would definitely suck, and Blissey has multiple mons I can swap in on and heal up against. I need to be careful with this, for sure. As for the 5 I think he'll definitely bring, the most flexible spot is next, that is Blissey's partner in crime, Corviknight. Yes, I have a Magnezone. No, I didn't bring it last time. Yes, he had a Shed Shell last time, and yes, I expect it again, just like with Klefki in the semifinals. However, adding in something like Body Press alongside one of its stabs and, say, Bulk Up and Roost makes for an incredibly difficult mon to get rid of, especially if we can make good switches back and forth into or out of it. Body Press pressure zone into offensive moves, which can be easily nullified with a good prediction into one of the other mons that we'll talk about in a little bit. U-turn is a good option too to trick zone, or with a Shed Shell, it's just too easy to just retreat, back out, only to wall most things on the team after that. Such a good mon, and like Blissey, I have to keep things alive in the back that have the ability to deal with it. So we not so successfully saw last time. I needed a T-Tar crit to win, otherwise I don't know I would have broken through that thing. With the final 4, I suppose I'll cover Volcarona next, an acquisition that definitely has the ability to beat me down by itself, if not for a choice counter or 2. Quiver Dance is terrifying, and that's always run so far, but I'm definitely also scared of getting burned by Flame Body in particular, or maybe a random coverage move, or even just roosting off damage with a physically defensive build, or subbing up. Lots of cool options on the Moth that I have to anticipate and get around. Now, next are the ground types that caused me a lot of trouble last time. We'll start with Gastrodon. I don't actually have a way to switch into this thing, because Scald burns, Earth Power damage, Toxic, not to mention Recovery by the way of Recover. Its straightforward set is, in this case, the most effective, and I can't exactly do much about it. I need to try and Toxic it as soon as possible, I think. But even that's easier said than done. What do I need to eat first to get that off? Or is it going to be possible to fit some grass coverage on something somewhere? I don't know if I'll get lucky like last time when Sneasel got 3 triple axle hits to take away most of its health. Oh, yeah, Crocodile, the thing that almost won in the game single-handedly last time? Yeah, that's a problem. Scarf is the biggest issue, but I saw a cool bluff set in a semifinals match that ran Choppleberry to deal with Cinderace, even after Scarf was revealed as a bluff. It'd be way easier to deal with that way, as Scarf outpaces and just destroys things like Dragapult, as well as, of course, everything else, particularly the new addition Mew. Earthquake is just as good coverage as before, and Stone Edge hits everything else off the ground. An absolute menace. Most of my prep was centered on this, as well as G-Max Hatterene. Again, I was relieved at first when I saw G-Max Venusaur drop, but I was totally unprepared for the menace that is G-Max Hat. Hatterene is a weird mon that early in Sword Shield got tons of usage, but I never really saw the value in it when using it in singles. It just kind of dropped without doing anything. This time around, though, wow, is it strong. And amazing max moves to complement it, too. Setting up Psychic Terrain and confusing the opponent with its stabs, alongside Mystical Fire to set up Sun in another way for the team. Absolute monster. Even without Life Orb or anything else to boost the power further, it's still 2 KOs just about everything I could possibly bring. Oh yeah, and Magic Bounce means I have to take it down the old-fashioned way. No Toxic stalling it for me. Fun. So, as we can see from the plethora of mons, that it is very difficult to take it down, so many cuts had to be made solely on the ability to handle these particular threats. Vullaby, for example, can't do anything to Hatterene. It relies on things like Toxic and Foul Play for damage, which also won't help with Corviknight or Blissey, while getting smacked by Dazzling Gleam from Hat. Easy no there. As was Sneasel, who, after getting 3 KOs last time, just doesn't do anything anymore. Krook will be Scarfed and requires Shard. Corviknight beats it all day. Hatterene used Trick Room. The biggest issue being Volcarona, who requires special coverage and can even burn me with Flame Body while also OHKOing me whenever it wants to. It's not Sneasel's day. I really wanted to justify bringing that again, but it just couldn't happen. Speaking of, I really wanted to bring Tangle into the finals. I really did! But aside from bringing Crocodile and Corviknight, it was too much of a liability. Hatterene bounces things back, Gastro and Blissey toxic me, Crook knocks me off, Corv taunts me, the Sun Core having potential to come. There's too much working against it, especially when I had better answers for the above. Similarly, Colossal could have been cool, particularly to a team with the Sun Core as well as Corviknight, not to mention a decent Hatterene answer with an immunity to fire and a resistance to fairy. But ultimately it can't do enough either, particularly with the threat I foresee the ground types to be. They've been my weakness all season, and I would be surprised if Chad didn't lean into them even more this game. The final slot varied often, but ultimately I decided to leave Vikavolt behind, yet another team member I brought last time that didn't make the cut here. Vikavolt struggles too much, particularly with things like Blissey and Hat that a certain other member of the team does not. Sticky Webs can be bounced back, aren't even that useful if they get down. If it's just going to be a momentum bot with Volt Switch that can be blocked by 2 members, one of which outspeeds and hits with Stone Edge, why am I using it over something else? No resistance to Hat's moves hurts too, and the lack of defensive utility in general hurts it, though the ground immunity kept it in the running for most of the team building process. Still, we're going to go into the finals with these 6. I definitely went hard to the paint refining this team, doing mock battles with myself to pick apart weaknesses in the team, and eventually decided on these 6 in particular. I might as well start with my dedicated lead, as I really don't see him leading with anything other than Crocodile. Logic, why are you leading with a Ghost type against a Scarf Krook? To bait that knockoff, of course, and with a Colbur Berry I'll be not healthy exactly, but still alive, that's for sure. Turn 1, I click U-turn with Dragapult to chunk Krook down to about a quarter or a third after tanking the knockoff. Yes, Dragapult is my kill leader, but its matchup isn't actually the best. Hat can nuke me or Trick Room me out in my speed tier. Corv resists Dragon and otherwise requires mediocre coverage to hit. Blissey is tanky on the special side in particular, with Torkoal on the physical side. Gaster is tanky overall. I can't exactly blow anything up with Dragapult unless I set up, but then how do I hit something like Hat? Willow is reflected and Dragon doesn't hit at all, so the solution I prepared is this mixed set, which is relatively standard I suppose, but I'm intending to take the Colbur proc immediately and do big damage to one of the biggest threats I face in Crocodile. I liked Hex as an option to not only hit a status Corviknight, we'll get more into that in a little bit, but also super effectively onto things like Hat, and neutrally onto everything else. I don't need much investment when it's a stab base 130 move. Base 100 special attack isn't exactly terrible. That's generally the idea. Wait for Hat to be gone for spamming burn statuses, and otherwise use the fast U-turn and the power of Dragon Darts to be annoying. When I U-turn out turn 1 though, where do I go? Well, what could take a knockoff better than my Silvally, who admittedly was Scarf set up until a few minutes before the match. Yeah, I went with an untested idea that suddenly popped into my mind as I realized how nice this typing was. Scarf was doing absolutely nothing for me, so I wanted to start looking around typings. Water was possible for how neutral it was to hit his team in general. Only Gastrodon and Shiftry are the resist. Shiftry barely counts. But I also didn't really have any key resistances either, and that really hurt, and it made just a tough time with Gastrodon, which is just a big issue. Grass wasn't the solution to that though either, as it had too tough a time with the rest of the matchup minus Crocodile, and still left it way too susceptible. You may recall that I'd had Flying last time. That was a possibility, but the ground could still hit it with Stone Edge or Toxic, and it didn't solve the Corviknight problem I was encountering. Fighting popped in my head briefly, hitting everything but Hat, at least neutrally, but thought that Krook wasn't a priority for that, and Blissey took plenty anyways from a non-ghost multi-attack. I even looked at Steel, a type that could be immune to Toxic, maybe hit the Hatterene for super effective damage, but that too failed with things like Corviknight or the Volcarona. Speaking of which, one practice match had me U-turning on Volk only to get burned. I thought to myself, I wonder how I can make it so I don't get burned by Volcarona or anything else. Oh yeah, fire typing. How does it do? Well, aside from being weak to the ground coverage we know is here, actually pretty well. Corviknight's obliterated, about the only typing that can do that. It's Blissey neutrally, Hat neutrally, Krook neutrally, Volcarona neutrally, can even be powered up by the sun if it comes. Really, this was the type to use. I wonder if my issues in the past with Silvally were boxing myself into typings that could fit more general problems rather than the specific ones I want to face. Either way, I like the idea of the set. As a Swords Dance when Krook is gone and or Gaster is low, or it could just be GG. U-turn is the logical conclusion to the Krook maneuvering after being U-turned into, as it does KO Krook after the Bolt U-turn, and keeps momentum for the obvious switch that's coming out. Otherwise, it KOs. So that's a win-win, I think. It's about the only time I can come in safely on Krook too, as it'll be locked into knockoff if the Colbur Berry is popped. Otherwise, spam multi-attack, come in on Corviknight and or Volcarona, explode on the Gastro. Yeah, the Gastro really is that much of an issue to take down. I need to go down something fierce, and +2 explosion should do it, especially if it's specially defensive like last time. It kind of ends up doing everything that Colossal would have done in the matchup, but better. Not to say Cole is always worse than Silvally Fire, because that isn't true. But here in particular, I love it. Walling fire types, including that Volcarona, the Shift Tree, even threatening the Corviknight. Very cool. I hope it gets to come into play and doesn't just get bopped by the Crocodile. Of course, I have an answer to that. I've kind of noticed this pattern in my recent team builders, but it sure seems like I've been relying more and more on the G-Max Anaconda to help me out with walling the big bad physical ground types. But max HP, max defense always seems to work out perfectly in the G-Max candidate, and this is a much safer switch-in compared to Silvally, while also not caring about losing the item, a Dream Ball in this case, because, as you'll recall, we have to hold a useless item on the G-Max. That doesn't change the 4 standard moves, so he doesn't exactly have an answer to the Edgequake combo, which actually hit quite a bit super effectively. Charizard, Rotom, Torkoal, especially Volcarona, hit super effectively, but nothing else exactly tanks them well. Sandblast in particular could be huge, trapping and chipping something like the Hat, or finishing off Crocodile even. It's a last-ditch answer to Volcarona, who hadn't set up too much with Max Rockfall. A rampaging G-Max Hat? What happens if I'm alive when I get back to small form? Rest, that's what. I can foresee more opportunities to rest this time. Things like Corviknight or Blissey aren't doing anything to me, especially not status, as I'll just be able to sleep it off or heal it up with Shedskin. Great mod in the matchup for sure, if not a boring set. There is one big issue that I want to highlight, and that is the Corviknight, who walls me endlessly. I have a couple possible solutions for that. One is, of course, the minus speed nature, which you'll notice. So I am base 71, Corviknight base 67, and if I go with the minus speed nature, I underspeed Corviknight, but not anything else. I still outspeed the stuff below it. Why is it important? Because Corviknight can roost, and if he does roost, I can at least get an Earthquake off. If it's not a bulk up set, I can do something to it in that regard. If it's not Iron Defense set too, ooh, would that be a problem. But I also have another possible solution to it, which is, of course, that Glare. One of the big ideas of the set is Corviknight is going to switch in on me almost every time, and I can just glare it down. Corviknight seems like a guaranteed answer because I can't do anything. You can make me into setup fodder, especially if I don't have coil, or it can make me waste my G-Max. So I tend to glare the first opportunity I get whenever Corviknight is coming in, and that should at least provide a status onto it, which is pretty nice for synergizing with something like the Hex on Dragapult. But with that being said, it's still a boring set, still kind of a generic set. Speaking of that though, let's grab the Mew. You know the set, the one that just wins. A couple of weeks ago it beat Clefable and Friends literally by itself, and I'm hoping for more of the same. I considered Scarf on Mew originally, actually, with Trick and 3 coverage moves for things like Volcarona and Crocodile. I could still cripple something like Corv or Blissey or even Hat with a Scarf, but I decided that I very much wanted Taunt. That's just a better way to cripple those passive mons aside from Hat. I also considered Amnesia for Hat, a weakness policy set to trigger off of knockoff from Krook, Dragon Dance to outspeed the Krook at +1, even Toxic Spikes if I didn't think he'd bounce them back, or Defog with Corv in order to more efficiently poison the Gastrodon. In the end, I'm going with all reliable. Taunt, stops, setup, and status. Roost for longevity and stalling. Knockoff for getting rid of fun items like that Scarf on Krook or Lefties on Gaster or Shed Shell on Corv. And Willow to halt the damage output from some mons. That being said, there is another main reason for the Willow, and if you see the EV spread, you may have an idea. This is a bit of a weird workaround way to deal with it, but that G-Max Hatterene sure sucks to deal with. And even at max HP and SPDF, I don't necessarily survive 2 G-Max Smites. Even then, I need some way to beat this thing, or at least nab a status on it. Are you familiar with the interaction between Magic Bounce and Synchronize? This is a weird one, but I attempt a status, it reflects the status back, I get status, and Synchronize, can toss the status right back onto Hatterene. Sure, it weakens my knockoff, but that damage really isn't why that's here. With the status, I can actually wear it down and beat it 1v1, as anything other than its fairy coverage isn't doing much of anything to me. I also have a couple of answers to that fairy typing. I have a Silvally Fire that I can switch into, and the next one on the list, Magnezone, who's only hit by Hat's Mystical Fire. Moving past Mew as the answer to Hat, Zone is obviously meant for Corviknight that can of course tank up things like Blissey and Rotom-Fan, and Hat missing Mystical Fire. That plus the need to force Shed Shell from Corviknight and the ability to trap otherwise, or if it's knockoff, is just so valuable. You know that if I come against Corv, he's going to either Body Press or Switch, so Substitute is incredible in finding out which one he's going to do. If he stays in, he doesn't have Shed Shell, so T-Bolt away. Swap to Krook, KO the weakened core with Body Press, which also provides nice damage to Blissey. Swap to Gastro, but that's the best part. This is far and away the most reliable way to slap that Toxic onto the Slug with near impunity, just the HP for a sub minus a couple turns away. That's definitely the ideal case scenario for that, so hopefully I don't miss. Otherwise, I like the idea of getting off damage on, say, Hatterene, or laying a Toxic on Volcarona, worst case scenario. It's really here for Corv, and anything past that is bonus, particularly getting a Toxic on Gastro, maybe a Body Press or 2 into the Blissey should that come. Finally, it's a boring Mon, but just like in week 1, we've got another somewhat heat move on Mantine. I had Haze for quite a bit of time, but when switching to Fire Silvally, I kind of felt like it was more and more unnecessary, with only Volk and Corviknight. Instead, along with the standard Roost, Toxic, and Scald Inflict status and recovery, we've got a neat tech move in Substitute. Yeah, you saw John with this last week on his Amoonguss. I like where he was going with it. I figured Mantine's biggest vulnerability was status. In front of a Gastrodon, what is he going to do to me? Nothing. That's what, as I'm immune to his 2-stab moves, as well as Toxic when I've got the sub up. That's efficient, and it lets me click Toxic if Hat isn't around, or Scald knowing he's got to switch out of something that literally cannot touch me. I think this is pretty cool, and even though we won last week without it, it's tough to go by without my Lucky Charm in Mantine. Undefeated with it so far, but this is the most important one yet. It's the finals, baby. Very close indeed, with the Rotom-Fan over Blissey was the only difference. I'm not terribly surprised. Chad seems to be favoring it, bringing it in 2 of his previous 3 battles. I wonder if it'll be Scarf for Dragapult. Krook is more likely Scarf, so maybe a Will-O-Wisp set? Everything seems standard at least, so let's just go for a standard start. Good luck and have fun to Chad, as Pult does indeed stare down the Krook. Strangely enough, that's what we wanted all along. Let's confirm the item 2 as... goes first knockoff damage, reduced by Colbur, still 62. It means you Scarfed, and I get to U-turn out for a good chunk of damage. We actually do just slightly more, which is pretty funny. It's not something I need health on right now because I have other tanks that need to take other hits. I need to get Krook down as much as possible because it's one of the things I have trouble tanking or outspeeding. So, honestly, amazing. This is the exact scenario I wanted. It seems odd to just have a straight-up trade to be the scenario I wanted, but here we are. And it's even better, because even if Silvally doesn't resist the knockoff, he's locked into a knockoff that won't get the power boost for hitting an item. And even better, I will get to keep the momentum because U-turn will KO, and if he switches out, I get the advantage there too, along with some valuable info potentially. And he is going to swap into the Gastrodon, and that U-turn does... Wow, really? That is indicating another special defense Gastrodon, just like last time. That's pretty good for me, I'd say. Gastrodon is something I really don't have a good switch into, but with the initiative U-turn, let's go, Mantine. Let's show off the tech move, as we do see lefties, of course. Substitute goes up, and Toxic fails. Absolutely perfect. Things are going exactly as I wanted. There's no reason to stay in with Gastrodon, so things I think are going to get a little bit better here. Well, I would love to get a Toxic off on this thing right now. The risk of him going into Hatterene is just too high, where the Scald damage seems pretty free on literally anything else on his team. And he does indeed switch. Glad to see I'm not punished for that. I hit the Rotom for a little bit of chip, and we're going to get the burn too. That is pretty nice. Not too impactful, but considering my game plan involves chipping things down, that's a great way to do it. I know he's just going to break my sub, probably with Volt Switch, but I don't think he'll go into Gaster again. I'm just going to toss off another Scald in case he tries to do something cheeky. So the Volt Switch will indeed break the sub, and into the hat he goes. So we're just going to get the Scald off, and wow, another burn. That is a much more straightforward way to get the burn than I was anticipating needing to do. One of the main objectives of this match was to get the burn on Hatterini, just so that if I have to sit in front of it, roost stall it, recover stall it, whatever I need to do, as long as I could get that burn on it, it would be chipped down eventually. So that's amazing. So now what? I have Mantine with no sub in front of Hat, very healthy though right now. So I think Trick Room is probably the answer. He seems to have been favoring Trick Room before G-Maxing, sometimes Trick Rooming, then waiting a turn, and then G-Maxing, such that this G-Max wears off the same turn that Trick Room does. But I think Trick Room is incoming, personally. But do I want Mantine in right now? Mantine is my best Volcarona answer, and Mew is EV to live hits, so whether or not he attacks or not, I think Mew is just going to be the right switch here, I think, just to make sure I'm in the position as he does Trick Room up here. G-Max is probably incoming. This is definitely critical. I've already had some good luck in this match, of course, because of those couple burns, but luck has not been a great thing this season. In testing, I lost multiple matches solely because of G-Max Smite, which always confuses me, causing me to hit myself in confusion. One time hurting myself eliminates Mew or forces me to switch around the hat, potentially putting too much chip onto the rest of my team, maybe even giving it another chance to Trick Room up a second time. That is definitely not ideal, but I don't really have much of a choice. I'm going to click Roost as he smites me. Let's see. I am EV to take this pretty well. It's still only 45. Confusion is critical. And breaking through Confusion is Mew. That is amazing. That is absolutely amazing. Oh, even breaking through the first time is more important, as at the very least, if I hit myself in Confusion next turn and go down, I go down at the same time that the G-Max does, so I have more options to get myself out of it. On turn 2 of G-Max, which is going to smite again, I also break through. Oh, thank goodness. Mew is safe. On turn 3 of G-Max smite, I actually break out of Confusion early and roost up to full, and G-Max ends. Perfect. We got another best case scenario as that burn is chipping away a little bit. So Hat is burned, G-Max is over. This was definitely necessary to win the match. Let's not blow it. Because it's burned, I don't see much need to switch for me, so I get to just knock off freely. And of course, I could have tried to swap out, get a better position with Trick Room ending, but Hat staying in did not matter at this point. A knock off on anything else could be very important, as we definitely see this. There goes the Scarf on Crocodile, which while I do outspeed it, I don't really hit it hard. But that really doesn't matter. And the important thing is taking that off, which means that things like the Silvally can outspeed it later. That is actually, the Dragapult also outspeeds it and can just hit it with the D-darts very easily. And considering the Hat is burned, that's also going to take a ton of damage from my Hex. So very happy that Dragapult is in a much better position right now to do some work to those couple things. Basically just a burn on, say, the Corviknight and probably Toxicking the Gastrodon. We are in absolute business. So I could totally stay in, and I could try to get a Will-O-Wisp off, but losing lefties and most of my health is not great. And Will-O-Wisp, by the way, is not a 100% accurate move. I'm going to use my designated check in Sandaconda. It will take the knockoff pretty easily, and it's going to take it even easier in the future without the Dream Ball. So again, in my theory crafting of this battle, Corviknight walls my Snake endlessly. Doubling into Zone is too aggressive, but a status like Glare is way better. So I can click Glare in anticipation of Corviknight coming in. Even if Krook stays in, that's pretty good. And, oh no, that's a Gastrodon. Oh no. I really wanted to Toxic that over Para. Para is actually pretty bad against this thing. It's already slow, and I cannot rely on those random Para chances when it's already going to hit too hard, or just a random one Toxic is all it really needs. Oh boy. So this is a Spadef Gaster though, not a Fizdef, so my ways of dealing with this are a little limited. Maybe if I think the Crocodile isn't a big issue anymore, and if he's going to be this reluctant to bring in Corviknight, let's go for it. Let's just go for it. Let's G-Max up the Snake, because G-Max Sandblast will do over half to Gaster while trapping it. Skull doesn't KO at this range. With this damage plus residual, I'm free to do it again and take out the other half of Gastro's health. Let's go. Gastro down first. First blood in the battle, but I feel even more in control than that implies. That was the toughest thing to switch into. I did not have a way to take that thing out reliably, especially after putting a para on it. Thank goodness he did not double there. That would have been absolutely disastrous. So that's going to help out Silvally a whole lot. It's going to help out the Dragapult a whole lot. Aside from Corviknight, that thing's really going in. I don't need to blow up with Silvally anymore. Oh man, okay, that's pretty good. So switch in will be Rotom, which is totally fine. I could take some Air Slashes, but I don't feel like taking the Willow right now, so I'm just going to max guard, see what it wants to do, get the tiny bit of chip with Burn. Note that it is not leftover, so it could still be a choice item potentially. That's totally fine here. Now in regular form, I will be able to take the Burn, and I'm a little low, so I'm just going to try to rest up. Sure, take the Burn, and rest. Yep. And even better, we're going to get the turn 0 wake up thanks to Shed Skin. So now we are very healthy. Finally, we get to click rest with this thing. I tried to rest earlier in the season against Steve's Lycanroc. That obviously did not work out because of rolls and such. But finally, we get to make that Shed Skin work. We get to make the rest work. It's about time. And the finals, too, a really nice spot to do that. He can burn me again if he'd like, but I really don't care much, honestly. So I'm just going to Stone Edge into a Reflect. Interesting. More screens against me in the playoffs. Not that they've been effective yet, but it means I only did 19% with a super effective move, so that's something. All the while Burn is chipping away at him down to 32%, so I'd say this is working out. Something that isn't 100% necessary. This thing doesn't have an easy switch in. It doesn't care about its damage output with screens up. So what can I do? What can I swap it? How about that Mew? Let's go. Let's just go for that onto the second screen. Let's go for a knockoff into Volk. Oh, so I think I know what his plan was. It's to burn with Flame Body, of course, and I'm only at 18%. I'm not totally confident about what can happen here. This is fine. So I'm not the most confident about what can happen from here. I am fully Spadef, and as I mentioned before, Mew is really not totally necessary. It's a really nice set. It can do a lot of different things. And I think the thing I need it to do is to stop this from getting out of hand right now. So as Synchronize, of course, fails, get rid of its heavy-duty boots, whatever, I'm going to stop it with Taunt so that it cannot Quiver Dance anymore. Didn't Bug Buzz that turn? I would have survived a Bug Buzz. Just to be clear, Bug Buzz was just not a terribly big threat to KO me, but that Taunt was important to stop it from Quiver Dancing anymore. I'm not even worried about Mew taking damage. It got me so much already. It survived the G-Max. I'm totally fine. It also stops the things about Volk I'm the most worried about, namely Sub, Safeguard, Roost, things like that. That's because I can now go into my Volcarona Answer, Mantine, who isn't carrying Haze anymore. And from a +1 Fire Dance, only 17%. It's going to be +2 next time because it gets the boost. While it could sub, it is way more important to get the Toxic off before he has the chance to do any of those things with Taunt wearing off potentially. 23% from Fire Dance and Toxic connects. Thank goodness. That is definitely the number one way to get this thing down, as I doubt that hat has Heal Bell. It's got to have all the coverage moves, right? Plus the Trick Room. I just need to stall this thing out, and the most effective way theoretically would be to sub up, I think. You see, I take less than 25% from Fire Dance, so the sub can survive and then I can roost up. However, with another special attack raise, that's going to make it a lot more difficult to do. There are a couple flaws with the plan. The first is getting an extra boost. The second is that Bug Buzz is a sound move, and that means it goes through sub. Yeah, he just finally discovered Bug Buzz would do more damage. Even though he didn't realize he went through the sub, he made the right play, so Mantine goes down. And the taunt is gone too, but we are not in the worst position, actually. A bit of chip means Toxic could take it down. Screens expire because, Light Clay. Still not an issue, especially if I can hit this thing from the physical side, especially if only I had something that could take a hit from this. It could hit everything remaining neutrally, something that could resist all of Volcarona's +3 hits. If only I had something like that. That last minute decision. So Volley Fire is in. It's going to take only 59% from Bug Buzz at +3, but the multi-attack will take down Volcarona. Light Screen now does finally go down, so that's pretty nice. Oh, that's very important. That's the biggest remaining threat on the team, the biggest thing that he set up. Probably only a couple possible issues left right now, honestly. We're up 5-4. Not much can switch in on this thing either, and I can't blame him for thinking that his Crocodile might be faster than me either, but I've got enough speed specifically for Crook were it not Scarfed, because once again, with the U-turn back and forth thing, I needed to make sure that if I did swap into Silvally with U-turn and he get knockoff, I could still KO and outspeed with the U-turn if he was not Scarf on turn 2. So I needed to make sure this had the speed. That is outstanding. This is very important. This goes down to, that's going to open up things like Mew a lot more. It's going to open up Zone incredibly because that's the last ground type that's out. This probably spells the end of the game too. I'm going to be honest. This is probably the end of the game right here. Hat was the originally good idea for a switch. Multi-attack doesn't KO at this range, so I can just U-turn out into Zone and Trick Room again. That's fine. That's totally fine. We're chipping everything. That's okay. Remember that I still have a whole Mew to take hits. Mystical Fire as well, and a Scout 4 anyway, so that's good. And on Dazzling Gleam, I can just heal up again. Notice how much that burn is doing, honestly. The roots have been on point, and I'm just going to knock off, get rid of that, do just a little bit of damage, and we're going to let Mantine claim that KO with the burn, which is amazing. We are now up very big. And as Corv comes in, I kind of realize, why hasn't this thing come in yet? Why do you wait until now to bring it in? This is honestly pretty confusing, but it's so nice to see it now as I can finally just put this game away. I'd like to taunt, see what we're working with. As he does bulk up, that's totally fine. Trick Room is going to expire too. So let's try and put this game away for good with a Will-O-Wisp, which does connect. Iron Head and bulk up all you want. You're not breaking through a Mew who prevents your roosts. It's honestly just a formality from here. With me clicking knockoff and roost before taunting eventually to prevent more roosts. Man, taunt has been so good. Let's be real, taunt has been such a good move. Shed Shell knocked off, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Especially for zone. Knockoff is doing a whole 5% of chip at a time. I'm not trying to say that I was trying to style here or anything, but may or may not have been a little too eager to get some more KOs for our kill leader here. Again, this is pretty much a formality at this point. He's trying to break through the burn with a crit or something here. So taunt again. Taunt is such a good move. We need to get some appreciation for how good Mew has been here. So here we go. I'm not saying I was a little bit greedy trying to get another KO for him, the kill leader, but yeah, Hex didn't do enough. That was just, I didn't calc this. That was my fault. We can talk about that one later. Either way, Magnezone can now come in, just clean up for the last mon there, and Rotom, which does absolutely nothing to me. Volt Switch doing nothing. Kind of clean up the Rotom for the final kill of the season, giving us a clean 4-0 victory in the finals. GG to Chad. Shout out to him for winning 6 games in a row to make it into the playoffs before succumbing to me in the end yet again. However weird the season may have been, we have made it to the promised land with me winning over Chad for the 3rd time. The Buffalo Buffalant are Wooper Club League Season 6 champions. What a fun season. Through my first 2 losses on the channel to 3 straight 6-0s to make my first ever Draft League transactions to the big swings in luck. Wow, what a fun ride it's been. I'd like to go over it in detail after we cover this match in detail, of course. His Volcarona was definitely a big threat. Don't know what the last move was, but I'm glad I was able to get off that taunt to stop it from setting up more or preventing my Toxic, which was far and away the most effective method to get rid of it. Hat was definitely a problem. What a strong mon, even with the item being TR69, and a single hit of Confusion could have stopped Mew cold, which could have opened up the Volk from being taunted, or any plethora of things. Corv, again, I'm not sure why it didn't come in earlier, especially considering it had a Shed Shell. Would have been a prime candidate for a double switch against probably Sandaconda. With a burn and taunt, though, it got effectively neutered. Crocodile, what a monster. Definitely glad I had an established game plan. It never came into later to threaten Mew, as even after being knockoffed, it could outspeed and threaten me hard. Gastro was terrifying, but definitely confused about its Spadef nature over Fizdef yet again. That allowed me to remove it unconventionally with the physical attacker despite not getting Toxic on it, so that's pretty nice. Finally, I didn't expect the Rotom, but I definitely appreciate it, as I love the Rotom form so much. Even this one. like Clay 2 to try to help Volk in particular to set up, maybe the Hat 2, along with Momentum, Farm Volt Switch, and a Deadly Willow for things like Bolt. It was honestly decent bring. On my side, Pull It with Clover was perfect to bait out the knockoff on Krookodile, get fantastic damage off on it. I always had a concern on how to finish it off, but this definitely worked. Didn't need to use Bolt much in the playoffs, interestingly enough, and even though I failed to grab it another KO, I'd say this worked out pretty well for what I needed it to do. Mew was, once again, the MVP with a taunt set. What a good move. Definitely influenced my decisions in the other league I'm doing right now, too, just in seeing how much work taunt has done in this league. Great call on all 4 moves. Great call on the full Spadef and HP. Way to break through the confusion effect. Perfect mon. MVP of the finals. I no doubt in my mind. Zone didn't do too much either, of course, against 2 ground types and Corv not coming out until the end. That makes sense. But it cleaned up perfectly, of course, and it put in plenty of work last week anyways. So Volley, 2 KOs in this match compared to 1 in the previous 10 weeks. Wow, what a great last second call on the typing. That worked out tremendously, including the U-turn follow-up to Dragapult that would have KO'd Krook, but it still let me figure out Gastor's EV spread, and it also KO'd the Volcarona and Krook later. Well done. I'd like to think we finally figured out how to make use of him by the end. Sandaconda, the Krook answer, ended up taking out Gastor. Really nice, honestly. In the end, I think a big part of the game was being able to use my G-Max to unexpected usefulness compared to the predictable nature of his hat. Though, of course, I got lucky with the lack of confusion. Getting rid of Gastor with the G-Max, well worth it. Great trade. Finally, Mantine snagged a pair of Key Burns that weren't necessarily game-changing, but were definitely nice for some chip, and also had an amazing substitute on Gastrodon. Definitely the good luck charm, though, of course, Mew was the MVP yet again. So we are champs yet again. How about a retrospective on the season in full? Here is the team in full, though we would of course be remiss if we didn't acknowledge the role of Tyranitar early in the team. T-Tar was honestly pretty great the 2 times I used it, baiting in Sylveon week 2 and nabbing a bunch of great KOs week 3, including a Focus Punch OHKOing Tauros and Focus Punch destroying Corviknight with a crit. I kind of realized that T-Tar isn't a straightforward mon, or rather it's straightforward how people are going to deal with it, and you need to be flexible and adjust. I knew something that was available would be better fit for the team, especially with all the weather teams dropping their weather, but I really did like that T-Tar. I definitely look forward to drafting it again, for sure. On the other hand, Stetland, a cool piece I suppose, but the issue is that it was impossible to get in unless it was extremely physically bulky, and that niche, which was a possibility in itself, meant that it was not possible to run Sandrush at the same time, and it just couldn't do enough, but it's a tier 5 for a reason. Let's go over the rest of the team's performance, starting with Dragapult, of course. 17 KOs in the season, good for the league leader, possibly a result of coming to all possible games, 11 total, which is of course tied from those possible appearances only with Chad's team as we both made it to the finals. Still, I appreciated the versatility it provided greatly, along with the comfortable speed tier. From mixed to specs to band to scarf to substitute to D-dance to boots, Pult was always reliable and always found a niche or use on the squad week in and week out. I cannot state enough how important and how valuable that speed stat was in making the whole team building process more comfortable. I'll mark it as one of the possible MVP candidates for the season for sure. Next up is going to be Mew, who, along with Volby, marked my first transactions I've ever made in a draft league. The main reason? Mew provided a big help against my big weakness of fighting in particular, and was bulky enough to be molded into whatever kind of offensive or defensive behemoth I wanted. Some key moves that I didn't have elsewhere, unpredictability, and a general nuisance to everyone. That taunt Rusa was definitely the best. It single-handedly won my Week 9 match, and it wrecked in the finals as well. Hazards was a cool set too, for sure, especially the itemless version that actually came through clutch, and otherwise just having key moves that could be super effective coverage was amazing. The final KD is only 2 and 3, but that is definitely a gross misrepresentation of its usefulness after being acquired. Another easy MVP candidate right here. Magnezone was one of the mons I was most excited to use coming into the season, as I was one of the only players that still petitioned it to be a tier 1 mon when it no longer carried hidden power. Body press is one heck of a drug, and it was fun to be able to show it off late in the season with iron defense and or substitute to ease prediction. Otherwise, it was so strong with specs and versatile enough most of the time anyways. Very cool mon, great abilities, solid performer. Next up is the Silvally. And while I was definitely excited to use it, I can't say I did a great job with it. I feel like I was trying to force it into a role it was never going to excel in, when instead it worked best as a specific counter to a specific mon I 100% knew would be coming. Either that or it needed to have the versatility to thrive in multiple feasible situations.
Choice Band may have been my favorite set for the week that it came, with a strong multi-attack that had cleaned up Clefable, and the calc was necessary with a Choice Band. That's the only thing that could have possibly done what it did. And the finals match may have been proof that finding the right typing, even if it necessarily isn't intuitive, is paramount. For the better understanding of the mod, I'm curious to see if I could use it better in a future league. Next up is Mantine. It was kind of the opposite of Silvally. This was definitely more so a pick that I quote-unquote settled for, as I was so set on that Talonflame and its speed tier, plus Will-O-Wisp. Alas, Mantine offered more than I had realized, as it went 8-0. 8 wins, no losses in the 8 matches I brought it, with 1 and 2 without it, so I needed it to be there if I wanted to win. Being a full special defense wall with very good typing and reliable recovery goes a long way. Toxic was just as, if not more reliable than Will-O-Wisp, and Mantine could still burn often with Scald. A water type immune to ground, resistant to fighting, high bulk, access to roost. I couldn't ask for much more. Extremely pleased with Mantine's performance this season, who prior to this season I saw it much more as a niche mon. Very pleased with what I saw out of it. Vikavolt is the other Tier 3, and I was very happy to use it again. Tier 3 may seem like a stretch to some people, but I view it like I did Galarian Weezing last season. It has the assets of a Tier 3 mon, even if people don't think so. Sticky Web, Ground Immunity, Fighting Resist, base 145 special attack with good enough coverage. Doubling down on electric types this high up never ended up being an issue either, as it could very easily take care of ground types with Bug Buzz or Energy Ball. Colossal was okay, I guess. My big issue is how much of a liability it was in front of things that couldn't hit hard. The amount of times that I could see a niche use for it, only to realize my opponent would have an easy switch to make Cole totally irrelevant, was just too much. Against a frailer team, sure, that'd be fine, but it has so many easy weaknesses that I just couldn't justify bringing it more than the 3 times they did. Unfortunate for sure, especially as I got more comfortable with my walls as I went along, but the ever-expanding move pool of mons that could hit it hard is getting to be just a bit too much. Sneasel was pretty nice. That speed tier is oh so important. It provided crucial roles in multiple games with strong knockoffs and ice moves. As expected, it was good enough. And for a not fully evolved mon, that's about all I could ask for. And maybe if I'd used it better against the Psyducks, maybe if I clicked Swords Dance at the right time, we could have seen it pull out a W by itself, which would have been pretty nice. We're skipping one of the tier 5s for now. Volpe was the other acquisition with Mew. Again, it's so passive, and despite what should be a decent typing, I just wasn't confident in it taking hits while hitting back with Toxic and Foul Play. That's about the only things it could do offensively. So similar to Colossal, I didn't like how passively it played, though it of course had possibility as a tank, but I had better ones, especially physically, as shown by my G-Max pick of Sandaconda, which I leaned on more and more as the season went on. I came to really appreciate G-Max as things went along, as I loved the extra HP in a pinch that helped me counter whatever physical threat my opponent had, even if I wasn't allowed an item to go with it. That Sand Tube effect, too, man, that alone netted me, I believe, 3 KOs in the season. So while it may look like it's only a 3 and 2 mon, G-Max Sandaconda netted multiple more KOs than that, and is another MVP candidate for sure. And finally, my first round pick, Tangela. This is meant to be a bit of a personal challenge, allowing me to use my all-time favorite Pokemon while having to grab it in the first round. With 4 appearances for my Tier 5, Tangela did not disappoint as a physical wall. Not necessarily independently from Sandaconda either, as it provided status, knockoff support, special attacks to take down messes like Dracovish and Rillaboom this season, and came with Sandaconda multiple times. Amazing mon. Of course, I definitely look forward to using it more often in the future. And as you can tell, even with 2 losses, I feel great about this season. Not just because of the title, of course, but because I got to use all these cool Pokemon. Many of them for the first time. Only Sneasel and Vikavolt were repeats for me. If I had to give an MVP between Dragapult, Mew, and Sandaconda, it's going to be Mew. Yeah, Mew wasn't here for 2 wins and a loss at the beginning of the season, but as soon as I acquired Mew, my season turned around. The first match was shakier than it should have been. Match 2 I lost, very close. And match 3 I won, very close. After that, only the loss in the match against the Kinglers were even a little bit close, and I think Mew played a huge role in that. It single-handedly won Week 9, and played an incredibly important role in the finals with very similar taunt sets. Simply amazing, but I cannot say enough about everything else. Dragapult with the stupid number of KOs and the speed, Sandaconda with the trapping and tankiness even before G-Max, Magnezone with a special offense and body press, Mantine's reliability. That's a wrap. Season 6 of the Wooper Club League is in the books with our 4th Wooper Club title. Please let me know how I did, what kinds of improvements you'd like to see in the future, editing-wise and or commentary-wise. and what you'd like me to cover next. Depending on feedback and personal enjoyment, I could see this becoming a passion project of sorts for me. I've obviously put plenty of work into it considering the 91 pages of scripts I've written up for this season, but the editing isn't something I've put much time into, and maybe there are some aspects of my speaking that you'd like to hear more of or less of. Please let me know that stuff down in the comments below. If you've made it this far to hear this plea for advice, thank you so much for taking the time to watch an amateur making content on something he loves. I sincerely appreciate it. With the final shout out being to the viewers, I think I'll wrap things up here. Whether the next series is on another draft league, the next regular Wooper Club draft season, our in-between Season 7 with special rules, or some other project entirely, I'll talk to you all next time. Season 6 champs, baby!